Imagine you're lying in bed long after midnight. The room almost completely dark except for a faint strip of light leaking in from under the door. And somewhere in the silence between one breath and the next, a thought enters your mind so gently that at first it doesn't feel like a thought at all. It feels more like a memory. Not your memory exactly, just a memory, a strange one. A feeling that something has been watching humanity for far longer than anyone admits. Not from the ground, not from the oceans, not from the shadows between governments or the sealed vaults under mountains, but from above, always above. A silent thing circling overhead, older than satellites, older than the space race, older perhaps than radio itself. A dark object turning slowly through the void, passing over sleeping cities, deserts, forests, military bases, power stations, observatories, and forgotten villages with equal indifference, never landing, never speaking plainly, never going away. Tonight we're drifting into one of the strangest conspiracies ever whispered about in the modern age, the story of the Black Knight satellite. Now, before we go further, let yourself settle. You do not need to decide what is true. You do not need to prove anything. You only need to listen. Because this is not the kind of story that rushes toward a conclusion. This is the kind of story that circles, like an object in orbit, like a thought that keeps coming back. It begins, as many unsettling things do, with signals. In the late 19th century, when electricity still felt almost magical to ordinary people, when many homes were lit dimly and the modern world had not yet fully assembled itself, brilliant inventors and dreamers were experimenting with invisible forces. Among them was Nikola Tesla, a man so wrapped in myth now that it is hard to separate the historical figure from the legend that has grown around him. Tesla was obsessed with transmission, energy, without wires, information through the air. The possibility that the world was not merely physical, but humming with unseen channels, just waiting to be tuned. In 1899, while conducting experiments in Colorado Springs, Tesla reported receiving unusual signals, rhythmic, repeating, not random, at least not to him. He became convinced that he might be hearing something not produced by earthly interference, perhaps intelligence, perhaps communication, perhaps a pattern from somewhere beyond the planet. That alone is enough to start a myth. An inventor of near supernatural reputation, alone with his machines, hearing strange signals from the sky. But myths do not become conspiracies unless they find more pieces to attach themselves to. And over the years, more pieces did appear. Some pointed to radio anomalies, some to military monitoring, some to unexplained echoes, some to the odd habit human beings have of noticing shapes in darkness and then building entire cathedrals of meaning around them. Still, the core suspicion remained. What if there really was something up there? Not a meteor, not a natural body, not a modern satellite, something older, something artificial, something that either predates our space programs or was placed in orbit by someone whose work never entered the public record. As the 20th century moved forward, the world became more sophisticated, more electrified, more militarized, and more paranoid. The skies that once belonged only to birds, clouds, and moonlight became highways for aircraft, then battlefields for ideology, and eventually territories for machines. Radar, radio interception, coded messages, listening stations, and defense networks reshaped the human relationship with the atmosphere. Then came the Cold War, that long gray corridor of fear in which governments watched one another so intensely that even silence started to feel suspicious. It was the perfect environment for a story like this to grow. During this period, reports surfaced of unidentified radio echoes and long-delayed signal returns. Some operators, scientists, and enthusiasts described odd phenomena that didn't fit neatly into expectations. A transmission would go out, and then, after a delay too strange to ignore, an echo would return. Not immediately, as normal reflection might suggest, but later, sometimes much later. These became known in some circles as long-delayed echoes, and they fascinated people, because an echo implies a surface, a reflector. A place where a signal goes, touches, and comes back. So the question followed almost automatically. What was it touching? The ionosphere? Perhaps a quirk of atmospheric conditions? Maybe, but to the imaginative mind, another possibility hovered just beyond the acceptable answer. An object, something hidden, something large enough, deliberate enough, and persistent enough to intercept signals. A dark watcher in orbit, a black knight. Now pause there for a moment. Feel the shape of that name. The Black Knight. It sounds medieval and futuristic at once, as though a relic from an old world somehow climbed into the machinery of a new one. A knight is armored, a knight serves a purpose, a knight guards. A black knight, however, belongs to stranger territory, ominous, hidden, possibly hostile, possibly protective, impossible to read, perfect for a conspiracy. And conspiracies love names. Without a name, a rumor drifts. With a name, it anchors. The Black Knight name gave the story weight, and once a story has weight, other mysteries begin sticking to it. By the mid-20th century, speculation broadened. Some said the U.S. military had detected an unidentified object in polar orbit before any known human technology should have been there. That detail mattered because polar orbit was not an early, easy path for launch technology. If an object were truly there before our public capabilities matured, then either history was incomplete or the object wasn't ours. That is the fork every good conspiracy offers. Either the official timeline is false or the universe is stranger than we were told. People rarely choose the middle option, which is that confusion, bad data, rumor, and selective memory are often enough to build a legend without any hidden truth at all. But the middle option is not nearly as hypnotic. The Black Knight story continued to gather fragments, Tesla's signals, long-delayed echoes, rumors of military tracking, objects in impossible orbit, strange transmissions, and then, like any legend trying to become immortal, collected interpretation. Some said the object was extraterrestrial, an alien probe placed near Earth perhaps 13,000 years ago to watch the development of human civilization. That number, 13,000, appears often in these circles because it reaches back far enough to feel ancient, but not so far that it becomes abstract. It places the object somewhere near the end of the last ice age, a time already wrapped in mystery and transformation. Seas rising, landscapes shifting, early societies evolving, enough uncertainty to let imagination move in. Others suggested the object was not alien, but human. A remnant of a secret civilization, technology inherited from a lost culture, Atlantean machinery, prehistoric engineering, the remains of knowledge preserved through catastrophe and kept hidden from the public by modern powers, who feared what it would mean if ordinary people discovered humanity had forgotten more than it remembers. Still others thought the Black Knight was a cover story for classified surveillance technology, not old at all, but merely described as ancient to muddy the trail. A test platform, a listening post, an orbital intelligence collector, a machine belonging not to some external intelligence, but to a government that benefited from confusion. That is the beauty of a durable conspiracy. It can absorb almost any theory and survive. Alien theory, secret military theory, lost civilization theory, interdimensional observer theory. Each version feeds the others, and every unanswered question becomes proof not of weakness, but of depth. Then came the photographs. This is where the story became visual, and once a mystery becomes visual, it spreads faster than reason can catch it. During a NASA shuttle mission in the late 1990s, photographs were taken showing a dark, oddly shaped object against the blackness of space and the curvature of Earth. To many viewers, it looked exactly like what the legend had been waiting for. A jagged black thing drifting in orbit. Not smooth like a familiar satellite, not bright like standard equipment, something irregular. Ancient looking, severe. There it was, people said, caught on camera, the Black Knight at last. The images spread everywhere conspiracy communities could carry them. Early internet forums, late-night radio shows, grainy documentaries, message boards, email chains, unsourced articles copied from page to page until no one could remember the first telling. Skeptics said the images were simply debris, a thermal blanket or equipment cover lost during the mission, something ordinary transformed by angle, shadow, and human suggestibility into a mechanical phantom. And perhaps they were right, but conspiracies are rarely defeated by the word ordinary. Because if you have already spent years believing that an unseen object circles the planet, then a photograph that resembles your expectation does not arrive as evidence to be tested. It arrives as confirmation. And confirmation is one of the most intoxicating substances on earth. The human mind loves the moment when scattered pieces appear to click together. Even if the click is illusory, even if half the pieces were carved afterward to fit, the sensation is powerful. It feels like awakening. It feels like stepping outside the herd. It feels like seeing beyond the veil. That is why conspiracy stories linger, not only because of the facts, but because of the feeling they create. The feeling that beneath the official version of reality, there is a second map, a hidden map. And if you can read it, you are no longer merely a passenger in history. You are an interpreter of it. Now imagine the Earth from very far away. Not the blue marble of postcards and textbook covers, but the actual planet in darkness. A curved field of night streaked with weather, pulsing with clusters of electric light. Some regions glitter with cities, others remain nearly black. Storms flash over oceans, auroras ripple at the poles, aircraft crawl across the darkness, satellites move in silent procession, and somewhere among them, perhaps something older, an object with no blinking lights, no public registry, no flag, no explanation. It drifts above wars and peace treaties, above elections and extinctions, above lovers sleeping beside one another and children dreaming in houses they think are safe. What would such an object be doing? Watching, recording, waiting, relaying messages to something even farther away? Or simply existing, its purpose long finished, a dead machine whose meaning only survives because we noticed it and could not bear not knowing why it was there? There is a melancholy possibility in that last one, that the Black Knight, if real, is not active at all, not a watcher, a ruin, a relic, an ancient machine still circling because nothing has forced it down, a monument not to our future but to someone else's forgotten past. There is something deeply haunting about ruins in general, a broken tower, an empty factory, shipwreck, a buried road. Human beings see them and feel the same question rise every time. Who made this? Why was it abandoned? What happened here? A ruin in space would be even worse, because it would suggest the universe is old, not just in stars and stone, but in failed intentions, machines sent outward, missions lost, witnesses gone, silent hardware lingering after its builders disappeared. If the Black Knight were such a ruin, then perhaps its greatest terror would not be hostility. It would be loneliness, a lonely object circling a world that forgot how to ask the right questions. But conspiracies do not usually settle in loneliness. They move toward control, toward secrecy, toward the possibility that someone knows more than they admit. And here the story thickens again. If governments track everything in orbit, and if they have for decades, then what do they know? This is where documents, leaks, official denials, and strategic silence all become part of the theater. Sometimes authorities say nothing because there is nothing to say. Sometimes they say nothing because saying something would legitimize nonsense. Sometimes they say nothing because they genuinely do not know. And sometimes, of course, they say nothing because the truth is classified. From the outside, these four silences look remarkably similar. That ambiguity gives conspiracies room to breathe. An unexplained object, silence. A blurry image, silence. Anomalous signal behavior, technical jargon, then silence. Old rumors resurfacing online, silence again. And in that silence, imagination becomes architecture. People build elaborate explanations, rooms connected to hallways, connected to chambers, under chambers, until the structure becomes so vast that disproving one room hardly matters. They simply move deeper inside. The Black Knight has inspired all manner of deeper rooms. Some claim specific coordinates or orbital patterns or decoded messages hidden in long-delayed echoes. Some say maps of stars have been extracted from signal sequences. Others suggest the object activates during moments of global stress, as though observing wars, launches, disasters, and nuclear tests. There are those who say it is connected to ancient monuments, That pyramids, stone circles, and megalithic sites were not just ceremonial or astronomical, but communicative, intended as markers or receivers for an intelligence overhead. And if that sounds unlikely, remember that the strength of these narratives is not strict logic. It is atmosphere, pattern, resonance, the emotional hum of possibility. Picture an ancient civilization raising stones in alignment with the heavens, not only to mark solstices, but to acknowledge a machine in the sky. Picture priests or astronomers watching a particular point of darkness pass overhead again and again, century after century, its return folded into myths of gods, watchers, fiery shields, black stars, or silent guardians. Picture those stories breaking apart over millennia until only fragments remain in legend, while the object itself keeps circling. By the time modern humanity rediscovers it, we no longer recognize it for what it is. We call it a conspiracy because we have forgotten the language it once belonged to. That idea is beautiful enough to survive whether or not it is true. And perhaps that is another reason these stories endure. They restore enchantment to the world. Official reality can feel dry, procedural, and over-labeled. A thermal blanket, a radar anomaly, misinterpreted telemetry, case closed. But the human spirit is often dissatisfied. With case closed, we crave the chill of the unresolved. We crave doors that remain slightly open, not because all mysteries conceal monsters, but because a world with no mysteries feels smaller than the one we inherited as children. As children, the world was enormous. Night skies felt populated. Old houses held secrets. Forest had presences. Static on the radio sounded like messages almost becoming words. Conspiracy stories, especially the softer, stranger ones, allow adults to revisit that atmosphere while pretending it is research. And the Black Knight is especially potent because it blends three primal fears: the fear of being watched, the fear of being lied to, and the fear that history is incomplete. Now let us wander a little deeper into the idea of watchers. Human beings have always imagined watchers. Angels, spirits, ancestors, stars with eyes, gods on mountains, hidden kings, secret police, satellites, algorithms, cameras above traffic lights, systems reading our habits. The form changes, but the feeling remains remarkably stable. To be watched is to feel that your life is not fully private. To be watched from the sky is to feel that privacy may never have existed at all. The Black Knight conspiracy transforms this anxiety into a shape. It gives surveillance a body, a black machine, old enough to seem inevitable, distant enough to be untouchable. If it were real, then perhaps every era misread it in the vocabulary available at the time. Ancient people called it a sign, medieval people an omen, early modern people a celestial curiosity, radio pioneers a signal source, Cold War strategists an unknown asset, internet users an alien probe, same object, different language. That is one of the most seductive aspects of the legend. It promises continuity across time. It says the world has contained at least one stable mystery all along, and generations merely take turns naming it. There is comfort in that, oddly. A mystery that survives empires feels almost dependable. But not all versions of the story are comforting. Some are distinctly darker. In one telling, the Black Knight is not passive observation, but quarantine. Earth, according to this idea, is being monitored because something about humanity is dangerous. Perhaps our aggression, perhaps our technology, perhaps something buried in our biology or consciousness that cannot be allowed to spread beyond the planet until it matures or fails. Under this theory, the object is less a telescope and more a lock, a sentinel, an orbital warden. That image changes the emotional color of the story immediately. No longer a forgotten relic or wandering probe. Now it is a guard tower. And if there is a guard tower, one naturally wonders what it is guarding in or keeping out. Could the Black Knight be a warning system? Could it activate if we launch the wrong craft, run the wrong experiment, transmit the wrong signal too far? Could every major leap in military or space technology have been quietly monitored for precisely this reason? Again, there is no solid evidence for such claims, but in the soft hours of the night, evidence and imagination often exchange coats. The mind becomes generous with possibilities. The room becomes receptive. You begin to remember every unusual government program, every declassified project, every historical lie that really did happen. And suddenly the barrier between the proven and the merely possible becomes easier to cross than it should. Because yes, governments have concealed things. Yes, official accounts have been wrong before. Yes, strange technologies often exist in classified form long before the public hears of them. And once those truths are acknowledged, even responsibly, they create an opening through which more dramatic claims can enter. The Black Knight steps gracefully through that opening. Then there is the signal theory. Some enthusiasts have argued that encoded messages related to the Black Knight have been found in old radio anomalies, and some point to star maps or astronomical coordinates as hidden content. In this version of the story, the object is not silent at all. We simply do not know how to listen properly. Or perhaps we have listened and the results were buried because they would destabilize our understanding of our place in the cosmos. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine scientists or intelligence analysts receiving a pattern that cannot be dismissed, a sequence of timings or returns that correspond precisely to a distant star system, or to a date, or to an instruction. What happens next? Do they announce it? Do they publish it? Or do they contain it, fearing panic, ridicule, geopolitical chaos, religious upheaval, or the simple impossibility of responsibly introducing such knowledge into the human bloodstream? Many conspiracy narratives depend not just on secrecy, but on understandable secrecy. The cover-up has to make emotional sense, and in this case, it does. If someone really found evidence of an ancient, non-human object in Earth orbit, many people can easily imagine why such information might be withheld, delayed, diluted, or denied. The public cannot even agree on smaller truths. How would it manage a truth like that? Yet there is a shadow beneath even this speculation, because if the object is trying to communicate, then perhaps the more troubling question is not whether we have heard it, but whether it has heard us. Think about the centuries of human noise rising into the air, primitive sparks from early transmitters, broadcast radio, military radar, television, satellite chatter, missile telemetry, deep space messages, digital storms pouring upward from a civilization increasingly unable to be quiet. If something has been watching from orbit for a very long time, then our species has effectively been speaking to it without knowing the language of the conversation. Every war announcement, every distress call, every propaganda broadcast, every love song on shortwave, every launch command, every emergency tone. The Black Knight, if real, would have listened to all of it. And what would it conclude? That we are brilliant, violent, lonely, still forming, not worth contacting, or perhaps not in charge of ourselves enough to trust with an answer. That may be one of the reasons this legend clings so strongly to the imagination. It does not merely ask whether we are alone, it asks whether we are being evaluated. Now the room around you is quiet, maybe too quiet, the kind of quiet that allows small details to grow. The hum in the wall, the cooling creak of the house, a passing car far away, and above it all, whether you can feel it or not, the enormous machinery of the sky continuing its motions. Thousands of cataloged objects, fragments, stages, satellites, debris, stations, probes. But among the known, there is always the temptation to believe in one unknown, one item that should not be there, one black shape in the inventory of heaven. That temptation becomes even stronger in the age of endless images. We live surrounded by evidence, or what feels like evidence, photos, clips, leaks, screenshots, scans. Yet the flood of imagery has not made the world simpler. It has made it more hallucinatory. Every image can be doubted. Every explanation can be countered. Every enhancement produces details that may or may not have been there. So the Black Knight thrives online not despite the abundance of visuals, but because of it. A blurry photo is enough. A suspicious shape is enough. A cropped frame from a shuttle mission is enough. Once shared, slowed, brightened, circled, narrated, and paired with ominous music, it becomes more than an object. It becomes an invitation. Look closer. Ask why. Ignore the official answer. Follow the thread. And once you follow one thread, you find it woven into others. The moon landing, ancient astronauts, hidden technologies, suppressed inventions, polar anomalies, deep underground bases, unidentified aerial phenomena, secret treaties. The Black Knight often appears at the center of these webs like a silent node, not because it proves the others, but because it harmonizes with them. It is a useful symbol, a dark puzzle piece connecting older wonder tales to modern technological suspicion. And then, inevitably, someone asks the biggest question. If it is real, why hasn't anyone gone up and touched it? The practical answers are boring enough to weaken the mood. Space is difficult. Objects are small, fast, dangerous, and expensive to approach. Missions are planned around priorities, budgets, safety, and known targets. Not every strange item in orbit becomes a hands-on investigation. But the conspiracy answer is more thrilling because they already have. They already inspected it. They already know what it is. And whatever they found was too strange to release. Maybe the hull is made of unfamiliar material. Maybe the object is older than expected. Maybe it responds when approached. Maybe there are markings on it. Maybe it is not dead. This is where the story approaches pure myth. And yet this is often the part people remember most vividly. The hidden encounter, the classified mission, the astronaut who saw more than they were allowed to report, the transmission cut short, the file sealed, the official statement polished into harmlessness. Myths often work this way, not by piling up certainty, but by arranging gaps in a way that feels intentional. And when enough gaps feel intentional, the absence of proof itself becomes dramatic. That is why simply debunking the Black Knight as debris does not end the story. It only trims one branch, the tree remains, because beneath every branch is the deeper root. What else are we not being told about the sky? There is perhaps a more philosophical way to hear this conspiracy. Maybe the Black Knight does not persist because of evidence. Maybe it persists because it gives form to a modern spiritual condition. We live in a time when many old certainties have thinned, traditional myths have weakened for some, institutional trust has weakened for many, and technology has become so powerful and opaque that it often feels indistinguishable from magic administered by bureaucracy. In such a world, a story about a hidden object in the sky does emotional work. It offers transcendence without religion, mystery without doctrine, meaning without consensus. It says there is still something above us that we do not control, do not understand, and perhaps were never meant to fully understand. That can be frightening. But it can also be strangely relieving, because if the world still contains a secret this large, then perhaps wonder has not been fully domesticated after all. Perhaps reality has not become only offices, passwords, traffic, and bills. Perhaps overhead, beyond policy and career and routine, something impossible is still making its patient rounds. And what would happen if tomorrow an agency held a press conference and confirmed it? Suppose they stepped to the podium and calmly explained that yes, an unidentified artificial object of unknown origin has occupied Earth orbit far longer than public records should permit. Suppose they admitted it has been monitored for decades. Suppose they displayed images, orbital data, perhaps even evidence of non-human manufacture. Would life change immediately? Maybe not as much as people think. Most of us would still wake, brush our teeth, go to work, make coffee, answer messages, and fold laundry. The rent would still be due. Trains would still run late. Dogs would still need feeding. The mundane has a stubborn dignity that survives almost any revelation. And yet something subtle would shift forever. The ceiling of the world would rise. History would reopen. Humanity would become, in a single announcement, less alone and less central. That is enough to make the story powerful, even in hypothetical form. Now let us imagine another possibility. The Black Knight is not a probe, not a weapon, not a relic, but a mirror. A story that reflects back the era staring at it. In Tesla's age, it reflected scientific wonder. In the Cold War, strategic fear. In the Internet age, distrust of institutions and hunger for hidden knowledge. In our own restless time, perhaps it reflects surveillance anxiety and a longing for mystery in a world over-explained yet understood. Maybe the object in the sky matters less than the shape it creates inside us. A black silhouette on which each generation projects its deepest unanswered question. Who's out there? Who's watching? What has been hidden? What have we forgotten? What if the official story is not the whole story? In that sense, the Black Knight is a perfect legend. It never lands, it never resolves. It only passes overhead again and again, giving each era another chance to interpret the darkness. And perhaps that is why, even now, when you hear the story late at night, it settles into the mind so easily, not like a fact, like an orbit. It comes around, it leaves. Then just when you think it's gone, it returns. Imagine you're standing alone in an open field far from the city, the kind of place where the sky is so broad it feels almost excessive. Above you are stars old enough to humble nations. You tilt your head back until your neck aches slightly, and for a moment you feel the full vertical distance between yourself and whatever might be passing overhead. You cannot see most satellites with the naked eye. You cannot see radio signals. You cannot see classified programs. You cannot see debris turning in darkness. You cannot see the exact border where knowledge gives way to story, but you can feel that the sky is not empty. No one ever really believed it was. Ancient people filled it with gods. Modern people filled it with machines. Conspiracy gives us something in between, a machine with the emotional weight of a god. That may be the Black Knight's true genius. Whether invented, misidentified, exaggerated, or real, it occupies a psychological niche that few other modern myths can fill. It is technological but ancient, scientific but mystical, distant but personal. Above all, it is patient. So patient enough to wait through empires, patents, rockets, computer chips, message boards, documentaries, and sleepless nights. Patient enough to let us talk ourselves into circles beneath it. And if, someday, some mission really does approach a dark object long whispered about and discovers that it is nothing more than torn material drifting where it should not have been, then perhaps the legend will finally weaken. But I doubt it will die, because once a mystery has lived in the imagination long enough, it no longer depends on its original evidence. It becomes folklore. And folklore does not require proof. It requires retelling, a voice in the dark, a listener half asleep, a sentence that begins in intimacy and opens into the impossible. Imagine you're not the first person to hear this story. Imagine someone in another century lay awake under a different roof, hearing wind move around the edges of the world, wondering whether the sky held something secret and deliberate. Imagine radio operators leaning closer to headphones, astronomers rubbing tired eyes, analysts filing reports they did not know how to classify, writers collecting rumors, children staring at stars, each of them in their own way, listening upward. And imagine that somewhere beyond sight, a black shape continues its circuit, without hurry, untouched by our arguments, unmoved by debunkings and documentaries, carrying either a great hidden truth or nothing at all except our need to believe one remains. In the end, perhaps that is the most haunting possibility. Not that the Black Knight is real, and not that it is fake, but that we may never fully know which answer would disturb us more. Because if it is real, the universe is stranger and more supervised than we imagined. And if it is not, then we must confront how eagerly the human mind builds watchers in the sky whenever earthly explanations become too plain to satisfy the soul. Either way, something is revealed about the heavens or about us, maybe both. So as the night grows quieter and your thoughts drift a little more slowly now, picture the earth turning beneath a cold belt of darkness. Picture the oceans breathing under moonlight. Picture cities dimming one district at a time. Picture cloud tops silvered by distant light. And picture, if you like, one unregistered shape moving far above them all, black against black, patient and unreadable, as though it has all the time in the universe. Maybe it is an object. Maybe it is a legend. Maybe those are not always different things. And if tomorrow you forget half of what you heard tonight, that is all right. Conspiracies like this are not meant to be held too tightly. They are meant to hover, to return later, to brush the edge of thought while you wash dishes or drive home at dusk or glance up at the sky without quite meaning to. And one evening, maybe weeks from now, maybe months, you will see a small point of motion above you and wonder, just for a second, what exactly is up there. That second is where the Black Knight lives. Not in proof, not in certainty, but in that fragile pause between the ordinary answer and the impossible one. And now the field grows darker. The stars continue where your eyes cannot. The earth keeps turning. The watcher, if there is one, keeps watch. And you, for tonight, can let the mystery remain in orbit.